Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
So, Melanie, one of the things we talked about today as we were contemplating hanging out in our yard in the gorgeous weather, this is the gorgeous June weather, and we was talking about how we really haven't been going places lately this spring.
We have not.
And I was speculating that maybe that's because we had spent so much time last fall forced from our home.
And I said, that seems not impossible.
Right.
We've become homebodies in part because
we couldn't be home for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I think there's a little bit, as you mentioned, the remnants of the pandemic.
Right. We usually, pre-pandemic would have gone to, some museums and that sort of thing. And I'm still a little bit museum hesitant, not because I'm afraid of getting sick so much as just what are the restrictions in place? Is the cafeteria going to be open? Will we have to wear masks?
It's the uncertainty.
Which all of that could probably be found by looking on the website. It's just yet another step, like a barrier. I have to do research before we can go, and I just haven't really got around to it. And there have been a few times when I've said, oh, this would be a good time. This week we have Friday open. It would be a good time. And then something came up.
Right.
And so I would have done, but.
Well, just for instance, this past Friday, we had to get the dumpster was being delivered for the roofing job, and so we had to be here for that. And now that food shopping is, we do our food shopping on Fridays. Now, if we take a Friday off, we've got to make sure we do food shopping on Thursday, which is not a huge deal. It's only an hour and a half or so, but it's just one of those things. It's yet another barrier to getting things done.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else happened Friday too? Wasn't there something else that was on Friday? Was Friday when the solar panels came off, or was that Thursday?
I think it was Friday.
It's Friday, yeah, because they have to take the solar panels off so the roof can be redone. And so all the solar panels are now leaning against the side of the house, and we're not going to have solar power during the best part of the year for getting solar energy, because they won't put it on. They told me you have to wait a month after they redo the roof before they'll put the panels back on. They have to let the roof settle, they said. So frustrating, since it was their fault to begin with. They're going to reimburse us. It's one way or the other. I'm going to make sure they reimburse us. Anyway, but one thing you did do is you went to the flea market on Saturday.
Right. The girls' troop, scout troop, was the church which has the flea market is the sponsor church for the girls' scout troop, and they do this flea market every Saturday during all the warm months, basically 6 months of the year. And so they have a concession stand, and they ask the girls to do some service hours at the concession stand a few Saturdays a year to help out. And so the girls did. They took a shift from 11 to 2 on Saturday. And it was pleasant. We sold hamburgers and hot dogs.
So you took them this time.
I took them.
I was going to take them, but you decided to take them, which was nice.
They sold hamburgers and hot dogs, and they had chips and pretzels and cold drinks. It was not super busy, and they took some time to wander around the flea market as well, which was fun. They'd never really been to a flea market before, and
you got some finds.
We had some finds. Each of the girls found a cute top, blouse, shirt. And Sophie also found a bracelet, and I found a big hat, a sun hat.
Big floppy sun hat.
And then after that, we went to Tractor Supply, where we got Sophie some hiking boots, and we picked up
what else did you get at Tractor Supply?
a garden trowel.
Oh, garden trowel, yes. And gawked at the little chicks, the baby chickens.
Baby chicks, so cute. And then after that, we went to the garden supply store.
Got some
nursery
plants.
And got some plants. We got some tomato plants, some flowers, and that's about it. I'm not feeling very ambitious about the garden this year. It's already June. It's kind of late to be putting stuff in, but we really did want to see if we could try to get some cherry tomatoes to grow. So I grabbed some cherry tomatoes. I put some marigolds in next to the cherry tomatoes, and I got a pot of basil and some geraniums because I just love geraniums. Red geraniums are one of my favorite flowers. They're just so cheerful.
You know, I wonder if people not everybody has Tractor Supply, but it's kind of a famous. Like I never knew about Tractor Supply until they moved to town. Like it's like it's a farm store kind of, but suburban farm store. They have everything. Like if you got horses, they got stuff for horses.
Yeah, they got feed and tack, saddles and like bridles and everything for horses. They've got live chicks and all the stuff you need for like poultry farming and gardening and planting, and I mean really. And
then like barbecue stuff, and they've got some clothes like work clothes.
Right, that's right.
Boots and hats. Yeah,
work boots, hats, shirts, and
propane accessories.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I caught your King of the Hill reference there.
Thank you. It's I mean, it's a real kind of lifestyle sort of thing. It's a like southern store in New England. It's kind of fascinating.
Is it southern?
It feels like a southern non-New Englandy thing. Although, you know, in rural Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine, it would be, you know, normal, fit right in, but it just feels like I guess it's not southern, more rural. That's what it feels like. It's a rural store in a suburban town.
Yes. So. But our town does have zoning in some places for livestock.
We have a couple farms in our town. We have like one that's like the Nitla farm down the street is a regular farm, pumpkin patch and everything.
And then there's another one over on the other side, and there's some people who have some sheep.
I've heard cows mooing. I don't think I'm imagining it. I think there are actually cows over there.
There are definitely ducks in the neighborhood.
Yep.
And
but
I've seen chickens in a few different places in town.
But I've seen a few people on our Facebook, town Facebook group, complaining that the town health agent comes by and tells them that they're, you know, they're not zoned for poultry or livestock, and so they have to get rid of their chickens and that sort of stuff. So it's not everywhere. We're not a right to farm town. I don't know if other people
parts
know
of our
that.
town are zoned for agriculture, poultry, etc., but not all of the town, I think.
If we were right to farm town, I would totally get some pigs and just throw them out in the backyard.
No, pigs are stinky animals.
They're not that smelly. No, they aren't.
Yes, they are.
Well, all animals are stinky if you don't clean up after them.
All animals are stinky, period. End of story. No, thank you.
You know what? Some nice chickens and ducks.
No, I will leave.
You
the
don't even
chickens
want a
and ducks.
dog or a cat, so that's like.
I'll leave the chickens and ducks to other people. I have friends who love them, and I am happy for them that they love their chickens and their ducks. I have no desire to have. No,
you have enough chaos in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dogs, never mind. Just we have neighbors who have packs of dogs, and it's constant barking all the time. And I just don't. I get enough of it from 2 yards over. I don't need it in my backyard. As much as I love dogs, that would be too much.
I'm not a pet person.
Yeah. Anyway, flea markets are fun.
Yes.
It's kind of a good thing I didn't go because I know I've been to the market before, actually. I took the girls a couple of years ago before the pandemic, when they were helping out the market. And there's a guy who sells computers, like old computers, like old Macs, and that's very dangerous.
Uh-huh.
I remember going through
danger.
He only wants $25 for that iMac. There's probably a reason he only wants $25 for it.
Right.
I've got 2 old iMacs like sitting like 5 feet to the left of Melanie.
Maybe you could give them to him. Just here, I won't even ask anything for them. Just take these off my hands, and you can sell them.
They're perfectly good. Anyway, yeah. So good, flea market. And so they'll probably be doing that again sometime soon. And it's nice. It's a nice way for them to be involved with the church and to raise a little money for the troop, which is good. So let's talk about some stuff we've been eating. We've had a couple of interesting things this week. Earlier this week, what did we have? We were making quiche. And you made a tomato and ham quiche?
Yeah, so I had enough spinach to make 2 spinach quiches, and that's my usual default because my kids will actually eat spinach quiche, and it's in fact their preferred favorite quiche. But I only had enough spinach to make 2, and we generally have been eating 3 quiches. So I sort of dredged through the refrigerator. I found some leftover ham, and I baked a potato and then pan fried it to make it kind of crispy.
Mm-hmm.
And I found some cherry tomatoes that you had roasted and packed away in the back of the fridge in olive oil. So I threw those in as well.
So these were cherry tomatoes I'd bought at the store for salads, but a while ago, several months ago, I saw that they were on the edge of going bad. Like they had just passed like being good for salad. They were too soft, but they hadn't gone bad yet. So yeah, I pan fried them in some oil and then packed them in oil in a jar in the fridge and just shoved it to the back.
Yep. Those were really, the flavor was really intense on the cherry tomatoes. And I had sauteed some onions, and then I threw the potato in and pan fried it. And then at the end, I threw the tomatoes in just to kind of heat them up and I don't know, something.
Kind of break them down a little bit for to get them into the quiche.
Right. And, but then there was all this like tomatoey oil left in the pan. And I'm thinking, this, I don't want to throw this down the sink. It looks yummy. What can I do with this beautiful tomatoey oil? Because it had a lot of the tomato pulp had kind of infused the oil.
Right.
And there happened to be a ciabatta roll that had
hard as a rock.
It was just a stale roll that was sitting on the counter.
We got it from the farmer's market. It was the last one in the bag. That's what, that sort of thing happens.
Yeah.
It was just stale. It was just, hard.
So I chopped the ciabatta roll into chunks and tossed it with the tomatoey oil.
To make tomato-infused croutons.
They did not make it into the salad, however.
They were so good, especially once
I put some Parmesan cheese on
once you
top.
added some Parmesan to it.
It was so tomatoey, Parmesan-y, crunchy bread. I just stood there in the kitchen and ate the entire bowl. It was a small ciabatta roll. It was not like a whole lot of croutons.
Okay, now take this and expand it, and now you've got a really interesting party food, just like something to throw out on the table at a party.
I suppose
it would. I mean, there would be, or like croutons for your salad or whatever. But yeah, I mean, just the idea of the tomatoey, cheesy oil, olive oil.
It was tasty.
Yeah, that was really good. So something else.
And I used the rest of that was about half the tomatoes. I used the rest of the tomatoes tonight in sauteed spinach. So I sauteed some bacon, and then I pulled the bacon out and I cooked some red onions and garlic in the bacon fat with a little bit of olive oil. And then I threw in the rest of the cherry tomatoes in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I added some salt and sugar and some vinegar, which was the brine that I had brined some quick pickles in. I was just
onion pickle.
Right. Just some onions and jalapenos. I'd made a quick pickle for some meal that we had. And so I had a gigantic container left of the brine from that. And I just poured that onto my spinach instead of using
cider vinegar or
vinegar.
Yeah.
And that was so good. It made a dressing, and I just poured that dressing over the spinach and kind of wilted it. And then, what do you call it? Put the bacon on top.
Right. So when I tasted it, I said, it reminds me of lobster. Now, it didn't taste like lobster. What I meant was, it was like sweet, savory, like lobster is. Like lobster is sweet and savory and briny, So it had that flavor. Flavor profile sounds so pretentious, but that's kind of what I mean. It reminds me a lot of how lobster tastes, but doesn't taste like lobster.
It was not lobstery.
No,
it was good.
If it was really good, and the tomato was really good in it. I'm really happy with Like, I mean, I almost want to go buy a container of cherry tomatoes and roast them and throw them in oil in the back of the fridge, just straight up without waiting. You know what I mean? I mean, that was just so good.
It's a great way to use those produce that's kind of on the edge too.
Right. Yes. And that's the other thing you mentioned too, is about using the brining liquid. Like you use the various brines, whether it's pickles quick pickles that you make yourself, or various brines or pickle juices from jars.
Right. When I catch you, like nowadays, when I catch you, like you finished a jar of pepperoncini or olives or something, and you're going to toss the brine down the sink. I'm like, no, wait, I'll use it. And you look at me like I'm crazy. But when I make pasta sauce, I usually add some chopped olives to it. But then I also put in like a good quarter cup, half a cup, sometimes even, of the olive brine. And I'll pour in pepperoncini brine too into the pasta sauce. And sometimes I don't even need to add salt. Like the brine is the salt for the sauce. You wouldn't want to add a lot of extra salt in addition to the brine.
No, it would be too salty.
But you're sort of infusing that olive flavor or that pepperoncini flavor into the sauce, and it's subtle. You can't really taste it. You're like tasting your pasta sauce and it says, oh, it tastes like pepperoncini or it tastes like olives. But it just adds a note that I really like.
I think it adds some depth, like it's been cooking for a long time.
Right. Because I usually do not I am not the Italian grandma letting the pasta sauce simmer all day on the stove, but I want to have that flavor. So this is sort of some of my shortcuts involve like brine.
Another way to add that slow cooked flavor is to use fire roasted tomatoes, like canned tomatoes.
Right.
Like you can buy like cans of fire roasted crushed tomato or diced tomato and that sort of stuff. And you could add, even just if one of the cans, if you're doing like multiple cans, if like you do part of it, just the fire roasted, that'll also add some depth of that tastes like it's been slow roasting all day.
Right. But like a lot of Sicilian pastas will use like anchovies or something to give some of that sort of fishy
umami. It's a total umami bomb. Yeah.
Right. But also some of that sort of salty, briny flavor.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm not about to add anchovies to my pasta sauce most of the time because, well, the other thing I do with pasta sauce is when I make a new pot, I make it often enough that when I make a new pot, I take the leftovers from the fridge and dump it into the pot. And so I have sort of a perpetual pasta sauce going, which is another way to give it some of that depth of flavor.
Right.
To take the pasta sauce, which has been sitting in the fridge for a week, and throw it in.
Make new sauce from it. Yeah. But if you put any kind of fish in that or meat in it,
no,
you can't do that because it would go bad before eventually, it would that would be a bad idea.
Right. But with like a marinara, it's just tomatoes and vegetables. And so there's nothing to go bad as long as you're cooking it every week or so.
Yeah. So something else we made this week is, which I think we mentioned before, we made the Japanese fried chicken, like karagi, I think it's called.
It was so good. I love that stuff so much.
It is so simple too. I should bring up the recipe. It is, you basically take boneless chicken thighs and you cut them up into strips. And let me see here, Japanese fried chicken. And you have a soy sauce, sake, ginger, garlic, sugar, and salt. And then you mix that together and you throw the chicken in and you let it sit for 30 minutes at room temp. So it's marinating it in it. Then you get like a pie plate or whatever of cornstarch. And then you take each piece of chicken and you coat it in the cornstarch, and then you sit it on a parchment lined pan to kind of dry. You want it to kind of set a bit. And then once you've done that, you have a pot of oil, that's a temp. And then you put them in one at a time in there until you've got, until it's not over full, but maybe like half the chicken at a time. And it's simple. Then you take it out and you let it drain and it's done. Now, we were saying it might be good to even double fry it.
I don't think that needs double frying. The tempura maybe, but not the chicken.
Well, the chicken, if you double fry it, it'll get crispier. It wasn't all that crispy.
Oh, I thought it was perfect crispness.
Okay. It didn't have that crunchy, crispy, but I mean, everyone liked it. They ate it all up.
the marinade gives that chicken, it's not a strong flavor, but it's just a little punch of flavor that's just so much better than regular fried chicken.
Yeah. And I mixed up some QP mayonnaise, the Japanese mayonnaise, with the sriracha. And it's the exact same thing they put on spicy tuna rolls at the sushi restaurant. That's all that spicy sauce is. It's mayonnaise and sriracha, and it as a dipping sauce for the chicken, the fried chicken, it was really good.
And then you also made some vegetable tempura too.
Yeah, I hadn't made tempura before, and so I just got a basic recipe out of Joy of Cooking, which it was just like flour, water, egg, salt, like it's like a handful of very basic ingredients, and then mix it up and then dip the vegetables in it and put them in the same oil to fry. And they were okay. I tried squash. Anything that's soft that doesn't crunch when you bite it raw is not going to be, I don't think it will work in a tempura. Like it has to have a crunch to it, like broccoli or carrot or even celery. I don't know that celery would be good.
I don't think celery would be good.
I was trying to think about like bell pepper might work. Cauliflower.
Cauliflower is one of my favorite tempura vegetables, and sweet potatoes are good too.
Yeah. Any cruciform veg, sweet potato I've had is good, but it needs to stand up to the oil and just the squash it tasted good, but it was just too soft. It wasn't fried.
I've had tempura squash that wasn't too soggy. I think
they maybe scrape the seeds out. That's another thing I see a lot in those is they so all you're getting is just the harder outer edge.
Also,
or
I think,
bigger ones too. That might be too.
But you could also probably draw out the oil by salting it and letting it
draw out the water.
Draw out the water. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I've oftentimes, if I'm going to roast squash, I like summer squash or zucchini, I salt it for a little bit, then pat it dry, and that pulls some of the water out, so it's not quite so wet and soggy.
But also scraping the seeds out probably would have been a good idea, and also maybe getting squashes that were bigger. These were early season summer squash, so they weren't all that large, and so they were pretty tender, young. So the batter was okay. It wasn't great. I've seen I would try to improve on it. I've seen some references to using seltzer or beer instead of water. That gives that fizz and maybe makes it a bit more the batter a little more interesting. I might have also added some like spices, like maybe garlic or ginger or something to it to give it a little more flavor.
I wouldn't want to overdo it though.
No, just a little bit. Just it didn't have a lot of like extra flavor to it, but it was good. It's a nice way to get some veggies there. And then you also made a slaw, and you basically took your basic curry slaw.
Right. I make a sort of sweet and spicy slaw. It's basically just mayonnaise, cider vinegar, grainy whole grain mustard, and some sugar, like brown sugar, sometimes a little bit of honey, and
curry.
And then curry powder. We use the Colchester Curry House curry powder, and it's so good.
Colchester Curry House is a listener to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, who was a sponsor for a while, and he sells his mom's recipe as curry mixes, spice mixes. And they're really good.
I do not generally like powdered curry mixes from the grocery store. To me, they're always way too heavy on something that I don't like.
Yeah.
But his curry blends, I haven't found one that I don't dislike. So I just do like maybe a quarter teaspoon per batch or half a teaspoon at most per batch of coleslaw. And it gives it a nice spicy kick. So for the Asian slaw, I just did that, but added just like a quarter teaspoon, half teaspoon of sesame oil to it. And
totally changed the flavor. Totally Asian.
Still had the curry powder in it.
Yeah.
But just the sesame oil made it really kind of fit in with the tempura.
Yeah, it did. So if you want to check out the curry powders, the curry mixes, it's colchestercurryhouse.com. And he was sponsored before. He's not a sponsor now, but so just in full disclosure. But I still buy the the spice mixes from him because they're so good. So we had that one night, and then you also made an apple cake this week. You had it in your mind to make an apple cake.
I did, and it came out okay. It was supposed to be super appley. I think it was like a King Arthur recipe that somebody had shared online, and I thought the places where there weren't apples, like at the very bottom corners of the cake, were a little bit on the dry side, which was a little disappointing. And then the cinnamon did not agree with me. It gave me heartburn, unfortunately. But the cake was pretty good, and everybody liked it.
Yeah, it was really good. I found it moist, pretty much. Like, I mean, maybe I didn't get one of those corners. I found it to be very moist and good. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah, it was kind of heavy on cinnamon, I think, even if you dialed the cinnamon back just a tiny bit, it wouldn't suffer from it.
Yeah, I think I could have gone a lot less. It was a little bit too heavy on the cinnamon in the apples.
Yeah, it was said for the filling, 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon.
That was too much. I think a half teaspoon would have been sufficient.
Yeah.
I did add a little bit of clove and allspice to it because I really like those flavors with apples as well. So I think that you could dial back the cinnamon and up the clove and allspice with good effect.
That's pretty much basically apple pie spice.
Right.
Yeah. Good. So there's been a lot of cooking around here. We made a few other things that we've talked about before this week as well, but obviously we had more meals than that. So, but that's what we've been cooking. So let's talk about what we've been watching and reading. And I want to mention something I've been watching. I watched this week, which was the season premiere of the Orville New Horizons. Now, the Orville is a TV series that was on Fox that premiered in... Let me see, the Orville. This is like the third season, I guess. It premiered in 2017, and it had 2 seasons right off the bat. And then it went off of Fox because Fox is stupid and doesn't know how to do science fiction. Firefly. So, and then it moved to Hulu, which Fox actually owned part of. It was affiliated with Fox. Now it's Disney property, but it was going to go to Hulu, and it finally came out, the pandemic and all that. So like 3 years later, it's back. And what's interesting about the Orville, it's Seth MacFarlane, who people would know he's the guy who created Family Guy, which is profane and foul, but he's a huge Star Trek fan and always wanted to be in Star Trek, to make Star Trek, to be on the show, but never got to do it. And so he created the Orville as sort of an homage, but he couldn't get anyone to produce it as a straight up science fiction show, like a serious dramatic science fiction show. So he made it as a Star Trek parody, a funny sort of slapsticky. But over time, it's become more and more serious, so that it's fun. Like, as this season premiere that just came out, there was no slapstick. It was very serious, very dramatic.
Interesting. So he sort of smuggled in the show he wanted.
Yes.
Under the guise of the show he could get.
He basically smuggled in a new Star Trek: The Next Generation's series. This could be, on Paramount as a Star Trek series. So this season premiere was very serious. It dealt with the topic of suicide. I mean, and racial hatred against an alien race, and it was very serious like that. It was kind of fascinating. And even some of the characters who in previous seasons were always, whenever they showed up, these minor characters, they were always like the source of slapstick humor. Totally like serious. Now, there was some fun and light moments in the episode. I didn't want to like make it seem like it was grim. It still had the DNA of the original show, but it's really fascinating. And the other interesting thing is how many of the people who are behind the scenes making the show are people who are from Star Trek, from especially Next Generation and Deep Space Nine era, like Brandon Braga and Andre Bormanis and all these other figures who are from Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine are now on this series. So it's kind of fascinating to see. I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it and how it goes. It's kind of wild.
So is it in the same universe as Star Trek?
No,
it's not.
Everything is sort of analogous. There's a Federation analog. I forget what they call it. Instead of United Federation of Planets, it's something else. There's a race that's analogous to Klingons, but also kind of like Romulans. There's a race that's like the Borg. They're an AI race though. They're not. There's no biological component. They're completely an AI robotic race that's trying to destroy all humanity. All living creatures, that sort of thing. So it's it's fascinating to see how they. I mean, I enjoy it. I like the show, but it's also fascinating to see how they've kind of snuck in a Star Trek remake that isn't Star Trek. It's just kind of wild. So I'll be curious to watch that. We probably will talk about it on Secrets of Star Trek at some point because it really does have those connections. Jimmy, Father Corey, and I did an episode of Secrets of Movies and TV Shows way back in, I think, episode 7 of that podcast on the first season of the Orville, the first half season of the Orville. So it'd be interesting to go back and re-listen to that. And something else I watched this week in preparation for Secrets of Movies and TV Show recording was Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I haven't seen that since I was a kid.
Oh, I hadn't seen that in ages. And I did that recording with Jimmy Aiken and Mike Denz and Thomas Salerno, and doing that episode with Jimmy was a lot of fun because he has a lot of that UFO knowledge, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But watching that is so fascinating. Just it's a product of its era, and how even just like the technology, like there's so many things that are period pieces now that set in the 70s. Like they're made today, but they're all set in the 70s.
Right.
This wasn't a period piece. This was made in the 70s and set in the 70s. And things like Richard Dreyfuss's character, Roy, getting lost driving on the back roads because he doesn't have a GPS. All he has is maps. And, there's no phone. He can't call anyone. He has to find a phone booth and how that plays into it. But there's this one scene where the government is trying to debunk all these claims that people have seen the UFOs. And it's this big meeting, and this government official says, look, Americans last year took 7 billion photographs, and out of all those photographs, not one of them has indisputable evidence of a UFO being an alien, spaceship. So that's got to tell you something. And then this newsman pipes up and says, I've been in the news business for 30 years, and not once have we ever caught an airliner crashing or a automobile crash for the 11 o'clock news. So your point doesn't prove anything, which is fascinating, which is a good point. By the way, it's a good rebuttal, but it's fascinating because since that time, we do have plane crashes being caught on not just camera, like a photograph, but video.
Right.
And car crashes and all this other stuff, because now everyone has a camera in their pocket, and there are closed circuit cameras everywhere
and dashboard cams.
Yes.
And
there are whole YouTube channels full of dashboard camera footage of this famous asteroid or meteor that went in Russia that crashed into in the middle of the day. And there's all these dash cam videos of it.
What is it with Russians and dash cams? There seems to be a lot of dash cam footage from Russia. Because
Russia doesn't have good auto insurance. And so in order to prove who's at fault, you have to have video evidence.
So Russians
have a dash cam as based on how the Russian law works, you have to have indisputable video evidence of who's at fault in order to be the one in the right if someone hits you. So that's why Russians have dash cams.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I did not know that.
I looked it up once because I had the same question. Anyway, Close Encounters, a lot of fun, totally holds up after all this time, including the special effects, which were all, by the way, not CGI, all practical effects, like all miniatures and stuff. It's amazing what they did with that. It's a great movie. So you watched a movie.
I watched Emma, which came out in
2020, the 2020 version. This based on the book
by Jane Austen, of course.
Yep.
And starring Anya Joy-Taylor, who we really loved in The Queen's Gambit.
Right.
So Emma is my least favorite Jane Austen novel. It's a lot of people's least favorite Jane Austen novel. And in fact, Jane Austen herself recognized that she might be the only person who actually likes Emma, that most readers will not like her. But the thing is that movie adaptations have generally not made Emma dislikable. They've all kind of tried to make her a character who, well, yeah, she has some faults, but you like her. Like Gwyneth Paltrow's Emma was generally, yeah, she's kind of meddlesome, but you don't really get the sense of the kind of spoiled rich girl, which is really who Emma is.
Right.
And what I really liked about this movie was that Anya is really good at playing that character who you don't hate them, but you definitely aren't always comfortable with them. Like in The Queen's Gambit, you didn't dislike her character, but at the same time, you didn't want to automatically gloss over all of her flaws either. They didn't become endearing flaws. They were actual, real.
She was a bit of an anti-hero at some points in that story.
Right. And I felt like that her Emma was very much like she is a character who is spoiled and needs to grow up and makes a lot of decisions, bad decisions in the course of the story. And by the end of it, she sort of repents of that, but she has a definite character arc. And I thought her Emma was really fascinating. I also really liked the guy who played Mr. Knightley. And the movie also had a really interesting feature was that the guy who plays Mr. Knightley, and I cannot remember his name, the actor's name.
Okay, so Johnny Flynn.
Johnny Flynn.
Okay.
He's evidently a musician, and so there's a part in the movie where he sings, but then he also does like in the beautiful like in between scenes shots that show like pastoral English countryside and people riding through carriages and stuff or walking across. They had English like period music playing, like songs, not just like instrumental pieces, but sung pieces. And it was kind of jarring at first. Like you've got this beautiful pastoral countryside and then suddenly people are singing an English folk song of the time. But it kind of worked thematically. It was very interesting. And not all of them were folk songs. Some of them were like more fine art arias and sort of things. I'm not a music person, so you can correct me with my terminology. So that was interesting. And then the character of Miss Bates was also played by an actress I'd seen before in Call the Midwife, who is really delightful, and I cannot remember her name.
Miranda Hart.
I really like Miranda Hart. Miss Bates is kind of a lonely spinster woman who talks too much, and she's kind of annoying. But Miranda Hart gave her heart. Like she really just embodied the character. I felt like the characters in this movie felt more like people and less like types. I don't know. They just had a sort of a more rounded quality to it. The scenery is beautiful. The houses are gorgeous as you want in a Jane Austen novel. The costumes are really fabulous. This was really one of my favorite Austen adaptations, I have to say. And
yeah, nominated for an Academy Award for Best Costume Design and Best Makeup and Hairstyling.
Yeah, the hairstyles were fabulous, actually. Yeah. So I recommend it. It's now finally on Amazon Prime. It's free if you don't mind watching the commercials, or you can pay for it.
You can rent it on Apple TV for $4 too. So
right, it's finally come down. Like when it was first out from the, it was like expensive, and I was not willing to pay for it because I don't like Emma very much. I was curious because a lot of people had watched it, but I was sort of holding off until I could watch it for free. And now I'm sort of thinking I would have actually paid money for this. So
it's funny because I remember when it came out, I remember reading in the paper there was some controversy over whether it was good or not. Like there was a lot of backlash against it.
Yeah, there is a gratuitous butt shot at the beginning. Mr. Knightley is shown getting dressed to go visit Emma, and he is shown in the Altogether, which I think directorially she wanted to establish him as this is the leading man who you are supposed to swoon over because look how handsome he is. But It didn't need to be there. There's also a scene where you don't see anything inappropriate, but Emma, having got dressed, is standing in front of the fire and pulls up her dress to warm her backside, and she's not wearing anything underneath her dress, which was appropriate for the period. Like, the costumes were really fabulous in that all of the layers of the clothing that they built up as they got dressed were period appropriate. Like, they were really wearing the appropriate clothes. But yeah,
didn't need to show that. Yeah,
we could have started with just the shirt without seeing him with no clothes on.
Right. So let's talk about some things we watched as a family. We watched Kenobi Part 3.
Yes.
We finally get to see a confrontation that had been coming. And I feel like that confrontation came early, even though that's midway through the series.
Yeah,
trying to talk about without
spoil it.
Yeah. Leia was really good. There's been controversy over the little girl who plays Leia. I think the 10-year-old girl, I like the lines she delivers, and in this episode I like the way she delivered them. I thought she was thought she was good. I thought she was appropriate. And trying to think of what else we could say. I did hear a rumor that this series is supposed to be a one-off, 6 and done. They're just going to have 6 episodes, and that's the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, I've heard a rumor that that they're talking about it. The reception has been so good. It was like the best premiere of a series ever on Disney Plus, which ever is like 3 years, but still, that means that maybe they want to make more. So we'll have the further adventures of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine or something.
Interesting. I mean, I felt like going into this, I really didn't know what kind of story one could tell about Obi-Wan on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more character intensive than I expected. And I like that. I liked that the fights really are designed not to be flashy, cool, look what we can do with lightsabers. They're not swashbuckling. Mm-hmm. They're much more character driven, which is one of the things I've liked about Star Wars, the animated shows, is I feel like the fights have the potential to tell a story about who a person is and what mind space they're in. And with Obi-Wan, I really feel like the fights have delivered on that. Like, they're very much character pieces as opposed to action pieces. So if you're looking for action, this isn't going to be the episode for you, because it's much more character driven.
I mean, there's definitely action in it.
Right, there's some chase scenes and stuff.
But it's a lot of it is about what's going on inside the characters.
Right. And I feel like what they've done with Obi-Wan, this is the Obi-Wan after the Clone Wars, after Order 66.
After the Jedi Order has been destroyed, after everything has fallen apart, and the Empire was...
Right, not just the Jedi Order destroyed, but the way it was destroyed with the profound betrayal
by his apprentice.
Of the clones, first of all, and his apprentice. Like, everything that he loved and worked for and fought for has turned out to not only did they lose, but it was a sham.
Right.
And he is just a broken man who has very little to live for. And
the one thing he has to live for is protect Luke.
And I really think that Ewan McGregor is delivering on that character. Like, I fully believe that his Obi-Wan is who he should be.
Yeah.
Like, emotionally, and just, it's really good.
It is really good.
On our respect.
Yeah. Ewan McGregor's always been a really good actor. So just in whatever he's done.
Yeah. It's not shocking that he's good, but it's.
No, he's really delivering. Some people wondered, how could he be, how could that be the same Obi-Wan that we see in A New Hope? That elderly man. Actually, that's 10 years later. Like, this takes place 10 years. This series takes place 10 years before A New Hope. And what's his name? Alec Guinness.
Oh.
Was only 10 years older than Ewan McGregor is right now in that. People in the past looked a lot younger. I have to say. Like, when a guy was like 50, 55, he looked like a granddad. Like, he looked old. I mean, I know I don't exactly look like a spring chicken, but I don't look like a granddad necessarily. Don't say anything. Let's move on. I'm afraid of what she's going to say.
I'm just saying that sometimes maybe we don't like
We perceive our own.
how we looked like now there are contemporaries and
So as opposed to, well, I guess you could say because all these actors are now my age, quote unquote, they don't look as old as they did when I was younger.
right. I'm wondering about that.
I suppose
like
that's a possibility.
how much is their effect of like?
I've heard this said in other places by people who are younger. So, like, I saw a meme. It was like Archie Bunker was like 49 when that was on. Like Archie Bunker, like grumpy old man. He's like the quintessential grumpy old man.
Right.
Like those sorts of things. Like the Jeffersons, Mr. I forget what his first name was. George Jefferson was like 38. Like he looked ancient to that. Like not ancient, but he looked a lot older than 38. But I suppose when you're 11 or 10, that looks ancient. But anyway, far afield. The other thing we watched was Falcon and Winter Soldier, the latest episode, part 3.
Third episode,
The Power Broker, which brings back Baron Zemo, who I think in Falcon and Winter Soldier is a much better character than he was in Civil War.
Yeah. I mean, in Civil War, he doesn't really get much opportunity to do much. I mean, he's kind of the behind the scenes bad guy, but you don't really see him batting very much.
Right.
And where you actually get his character is a bit more developed in Falcon and Winter Soldier. And in fact, I'm kind of hoping, I'm trying to remember how it ends. Don't spoil me, but
yeah.
Are we going to see him again in future movies?
That'd be interesting. I don't know. It would be, I mean, yeah, it's entirely possible. They're building up to something with the Countess, Elaine Bennis, what's her name? Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character?
Or Baroness.
Whatever it is, some aristocratic title.
Because the thought I had today was I was looking up the actor who plays Zemo. And as I'm reading the Wikipedia article talking about how his character was developed in the comics, he's married to a woman who is called the Baroness.
I don't think she's the Baroness. I think she's the Countess. Oh. But they also...
curious.
They mess with the continuity. They don't necessarily take it exactly.
No, I'm just wondering if there's going to be...
I'm saying it's possible that there's a connection.
It's possible that there's a connection between her and him.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that might be.
Yeah.
So
they're building to something, and it would be fun to have him back. But yeah, to have him come back in a future movie or show, because I like him in this, and he develops. He sort of becomes less black and white and more into the gray by the end of the series. So yeah, that was pretty good. And I'm still liking that dynamic between
Bucky and Sam.
Bucky and Sam. It was Sebastian Stan. Bucky and Sam. Yeah.
It's so good. I think there's a point where they're bickering and Zemo walks in and they're just like, they both turn to him and they shut up. This doesn't concern you. And then they go back to bickering, and there's such a fun dynamic between the two of them.
They're like a married couple.
Yes, I love it. I really do love it.
So, and now you're continuing to read The Aviator by Vodolowskin?
I am, and it's so good. Oh, today I read this scene that was just absolutely gorgeous and heartbreaking, and one of my favorite scenes. And I really don't want to spoil the novel, but I want to tell you about the scene, but there is no way I can tell you about the scene without spoiling the novel, because the novel is very much one of those, the character wakes up in a hospital and he doesn't have any memories. And so who he is unfolds gradually as he remembers.
This is like Project Hail Mary, where you can't really talk about it without spoiling it.
Right. There's nothing I can say about this book that doesn't spoil it, because when he wakes up, he's a blank page, and the novel unfolds through him gradually remembering. The novel is his journal that he's keeping as he remembers things. One thing I can say about it is it has this really cool device where he doesn't know what year it is. And there's a good plot reason why he doesn't know what year it is. And neither do you when he wakes up. And so the journal just is Monday is the days of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And none of them are dated. And so it has this very weird, it's keeping time, but it's also kind of in this timeless limbo state. And that's very thematic for the novel, which is really very much about history in a Russian context. And like how you think about history and also about the things that history doesn't record and whether the things that history doesn't record are somehow reaching towards eternity. And there's a very spiritual element to the book, as there is in all of Vodolazkin's books, that I really I love it. It's not strong. It's subtle, but I think it's all the more powerful for being subtle. But there is definitely a presence of orthodoxy, Russian orthodoxy, and this exploration of the themes of when and where life touches on eternity, which I'm seeing him in this, but in this very weird postmodern way too, where he's very much concerned with like history and playing around with how timelines work and things too. So yeah, I'm really liking it.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, you've told me a little more than you said in the podcast about.
I don't want to spoil it for
right. You don't want to spoil it for others, but yeah, it sounds like something folks might want to read after they've finished Brisbane, perhaps.
Yeah, I can already tell I'm going to go on a kick and read everything of his that's been translated into English, and sit around waiting for the next translation.
Right. All right, so let's move on to talking about Pentecost. It is Pentecost Sunday as we record at the end of the Easter season, and we celebrated that by going to Mass in our packed parish church. It was full to the gills. It's
the fullest I've ever seen that church.
It might have been more full for Father's installation Mass where the Cardinal came.
We didn't go.
But we didn't get to go to that because it was too full. Yeah.
It was very joyful. I mean, I love a full church, and unfortunately, most of the time, it's not even anywhere near half full.
So that what they did, we have a 3 parish collaborative. We have in the city with our parishes, there are 3 parishes total, and with 1 pastor, and and the vicars, the priests who assist, and what they said was. This was going to be this was at 10:30. So all the masses at all the parishes that were at 10:30 or after were canceled. And there's only going to be this one mass. There were earlier masses in the day.
So the early morning masses and the anticipatory masses on Saturday were not canceled.
Right.
But the other 10:30 masses, and I think there was like a noon.
There's usually later masses for the Cape Verdean and Haitian communities as well. Yeah, and those were all canceled, and it was all going to be at this one at our parish church because it's the largest of the 3. It's a pretty good sized church, and they had a combined choir.
So all 3 choirs, the English choir, the Haitian choir, and the Cape Verdean choir, all together, and most of them were singing on most of the songs. Like I noticed that a lot of the Haitians and Cape Verdeans were joining in the English hymns, and a lot of the English choir members were joining in to the French and Portuguese hymns, it was really cool to see this like multilingual celebration. And then there were hymns in Latin too. They sang the sequence in Latin, which was beautiful.
And the Agnus Dei and the
Sanctus.
The Sanctus, right, but not the Gloria. Unfortunately, I don't know why not. But there were 7 languages that Father pointed out. So there's Latin, Greek, Kyrie, English, obviously, Haitian Creole and French, and Cape Verdean Creole and Portuguese.
Right, because the readings are done not in Creole, but like the Haitian reading is done in French.
Haitian Creole is a form or a dialect of French. It's a version of French, almost.
Yeah,
a linguist would dispute that. I know, but I'm trying.
My linguistic is my inner linguist is kind of going, but sort of
yes, but no.
Not technically a dialect, but yeah.
And then the same thing with Cape Verdean Creole. It's based on Portuguese.
Right. And so the readings are from the lectionary is, I think, officially not in Creole, but in Portuguese and French. But the homilies were delivered in Creole.
Right. And yeah.
And I think the hymns might have been in Creole too. I'm not sure. I was trying to follow along, but I could follow
also the intercessions, I think, were in Creole.
Oh, possibly.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I could.
It's hard to tell unless you're fluent in any of those languages.
Right. I mean, I speak French relatively well. Not speak, but I can understand it
anyway. Yeah.
And I could follow along mostly, even with the Portuguese, because I've studied Latin and French and taken some Italian. So I kind of sort of know, at least I recognize most of the nouns and verbs. The other words in between, I'm kind of lost on.
Right. But you said the lector who read the French was really good. Her
enunciation was so good that I was following along with the English text, but I could pretty much understand most of the French. And what I didn't understand was not because she didn't say it clearly, but because my French is rusty.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful mass. I mean, the interesting the differences. There's a lot more readiness to clap among the Cape Verdean and Haitian. I couldn't tell which community it was that was more clapping more, and doing the variations. There's one thing that one of the communities does at the end of communion, when the priest is bringing the host to repose in the tabernacle.
It was the Cape Verdeans.
Cape Verde. Okay.
Yeah.
They stand. They don't kneel. They stand for that when he's bringing the ciborium back to the tabernacle.
They stood, and I think they did some sort of reverence when he actually put it in the tabernacle.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking. Yeah.
Like a bow or a nod or something, or maybe they crossed themselves. I can't remember the details, but I did notice it felt different. Like it was.
But it was so awesome to be like when the singing reverberates in the church, when it's so full-throated, everyone sings. It's like you don't get that experience very much, at least in our parishes around here,
because they're half empty.
They're half empty, right? We have so many churches that are half empty. And it's kind of funny because in other places in the country where they don't have as many Catholics, but they don't have nearly as many churches either. We've got this legacy of these old churches that were built back when there were not even just way more Catholics, when we refused to have people from different countries of origin in the same parish. We have to have the French parish there and the Irish parish there and the Italian parish here, for no good reason, really.
Well, I think originally there was a good reason.
Well, but it persisted for no good reason even after the first generation. It was and it was kind of silly. Like if an Irish kid showed up at the French church, the pastor would say, "Go back to your own church."
Right, that was silly. I mean, originally I think it was an attempt to minister to immigrants who didn't speak English in their own languages, which was good. But then once everybody had assimilated and was speaking English, then there was sort of persisted into this.
Right. I mean, there are still cultural things like the celebrations and holidays and that sort of stuff that continued, and those are good too. But that's what I love about our parishes is we have these celebrations. We have like the parish picnic, and you have Cape Verdean food and Haitian food, and people are bringing different things, and we're combining our cultures. We're not combining them, but meeting them, experiencing them.
Right. And it's nice. It was a really nice gesture to have Pentecost be the mass where everyone came together, because of course that's sort of the point of Pentecost.
Right. It was that first Pentecost where we are Phrygians and Parthians and Medes, and we are hearing them in our own languages, and we have all of these languages, and we're praying together in these languages. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, we do have a language we all could pray together in called Latin, but that's not the reality of things today, I suppose. But it would be nice to do more of the prayers in Latin, I guess. I love hearing everyone praying together in a prayer they know. Everyone knows the Agnus Dei, so everyone sings it together. It's just, that's just my little hobby horse that I ride sometimes. Anyway, it was a beautiful Pentecost. There were basically three very short homilies, one in Haitian Creole, one in Cape Verdean, and one in English with Father Matt.
It was interesting to me because I couldn't quite follow it, but both the Haitian priest and the Cape Verdean priest led their congregations through some kind of a litany.
Right. Some kind of call and response prayer.
And I mean, I heard like the names of saints, and it sounded like at one point they were saying like, pray for us, but it was more than just a litany of the saints. There was a back and forth, and I could catch enough of it to kind of get a sense.
A couple of titles of Mary, different titles of Mary. Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly what that was about, but it seemed like something that they do regularly, probably like at every mass.
Because the congregation all knew the responses, and they were saying them
automatically, basically,
right, loudly, and it was really beautiful. I was like, Father Matt, you going to join in?
right.
Do we get to do some sort of a prayer? No. as the pastor, he was doing much more of the drawing it all together and talking about the experience of the
right. I mean, you could tell he was bursting with pride and joy at having this happen, because it was just, I mean, it was awesome. It was really great. I was a little dubious. We got there very, very early. We got there a half hour before mass started.
I think it turned out that the church did not overflow, partly because the parking lot capacity is actually smaller than the church capacity.
Church was built in an era before everyone drove their cars to church.
Right.
Yeah.
So the parking lot was packed, like people were double parked, but there was still room in most of the pews. Like you could have squeezed in another 50 people easy, maybe even more, without like having people standing.
Right. Yeah, there was that big tractor trailer in the parking lot, which was unfortunate. That probably taken up a half a dozen spots or more. But yeah, it was the parking lot. It is interesting. These older, especially up in the Northeast, these older parishes built long time ago. Like Immaculate Conception had the same problem. You know, the church was built 170 years ago now, and it's got this tiny parking lot where the convent used to stand.
Right. Edith Stein is 100 and it celebrated its 100th anniversary, like right when we started going.
Oh, right.
So it's like 100. Of
course, it was St. Edward's. It wasn't St. Edith Stein, because there was no St. Edith Stein when it was founded.
Right.
But yeah, we've been going there like 7 years, so it's 107 years.
Something like that. Yeah.
So anyway, let's wrap it up. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Luca C., Mark T., Theo V., Paul B., and David B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. You can find links from our discussion in our show notes at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. Send us your feedback at the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to bets@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest.